Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov. Good evening. I think I can say very proudly, Baruch Shechianu v'kiyimanu v'giyanu lazaman hazeh. Thank God, we were waiting for this moment for a long time. For those of you who have been in the know for a while, you've been learning me for a long time, we've been hoping to do this since before Corona, before COVID, before all of that. But the world, what happened in the world happened, and we are on this side of it. And Baruch Hashem, since we last met together in person in August in New York, a lot of things have happened, and we finally put together this shiur. I want to just, before I start, I want to say thank you to everybody who's here tonight, to all of you who are learning with me, for putting your confidence in coming to this Beit Midrash and being a part of it. I see that we're clearly not all just from New York, so I hope that you know that New York just means that's the time zone the shiur is in, but it's not limited only to people from there. I'm seeing Canada, I'm seeing San Diego, I'm seeing all across the world, so Baruchim Habayim B'Shem Hashem. A few thank you to the cheva that really got this off the ground. It's okay if I mention a few names. I want to mention my brothers Ronen and Ariel and their wives, respectively Kira and Shira. Those rhyme. I didn't even realize that until right now. And to my dear friends Binyamin, Simcha and Nechama Schofield, to Yonatan Rachmani, to Rabbi Tzvi Holt, to a number, I hope I didn't forget anybody, part of that, Zev Gotkin. How could I forget Zev Gotkin? Thank you so much to all of you for putting Shiviti New York together and being a nudnik on my shoulder and saying, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, and Baruch Hashem, we did it. Shevach lein. For those of you who have studied with me before, I think you know that wherever we go and wherever we are, the one thing that is the common denominator in all of our shiurim is that they are open to everybody and they don't cost anything. And so people ask me, so who's the major donor behind Shiviti? And I'll tell you right now, the answer is, she's right here, she's on Zoom. Her name is Rabbi Devar Halevy. She is the supporter of everything good that happens here under this title, Shiviti. Not only does she teach, not only does she lead, not only is she with us, really, Shali v'shalachem, shalahi. Everything that we have is hers. And I wanted at this point just to say thank you very much to the Rabbanit for being who she is, for all of us, not just for me, but especially for me. Thank you very much. And finally, Hodun Adonai Kitov, Kina Olam Chasdo, thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for letting us live until this moment. Something to live for. Anyone who studied here at the Beit Midrash, whether it's in San Diego, it's in LA, it's in New York, it's in the UK, you know that we are notorious for introductions. Hagdamot. I think if you are part of the Agadata class, there's like 77 introductions to the Agadata class. It's something that has become part of who and what we are, but I promised that I wasn't going to do the same thing this time around. The reason is very simple. We don't have so many weeks till we're going to have to break for Pesach, and I don't want to start introducing all the introductions. I'd rather do something different. And let's jump in first, and then B'ezrat Hashem, and we will introduce things as they come along. That being said, even though there are no standalone introductions, there are some introductions that I have to make right now. So we'll do them together. First and foremost, I'm assuming that you all got here through a Zoom link. Many of you maybe through WhatsApp, maybe of you through the Google Classroom. You should just know that the WhatsApp groups that people are in, I looked recently, I'm in like 157 mutual WhatsApp groups with somebody else. So many WhatsApp groups that I usually don't even check my WhatsApp anymore. If you ever wonder why you messaged me, I don't answer. I just, so many messages. I wake up in the morning, Baruch Hashem. So we use a platform called the Google Classroom. The Google Classroom, it's not the sharpest of the platforms that exist in the world right now, but it works, it does a good job. It has a place to post Zoom links, to post other biographies of Chachamim, PDFs, all kinds of things like that. If you're not part of the Google Classroom, you can join the Google Classroom. If you don't find the instructions, just send an email to info@shiviti.org, and B'ezrat Hashem, we will get you those instructions, because I will not continue pestering the chevra in the WhatsApp group with all the announcements that are needed for the shiur. So maybe my introduction number one. And for those of you who have your cameras on, those of you who don't, you spoke to me about it before, chevra, don't judge anybody. That's not how this works. But those who have your cameras on, I really appreciate being able to see you. There's nobody else in this room here, so to be able to see your faces and to learn with you and read your reactions, hopefully positive ones throughout the shiur, it makes the whole difference for me. Let's start at the top. Politics. The title of the shiur was Mishpat Tzedek, a law of righteousness. Our people have been commanded as a nation to lead the world in righteousness, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, to surely pursue righteousness. Our leaders were commanded, v'shaftu et ha'am, Mishpat Tzedek, to judge the people with righteousness. And if I had to tell you what is the title for Jewish national law, it would be Mishpat Tzedek, a judgment of righteousness. The problem with studying Jewish national law, and likely the reason why many people don't, is because it touches very heavily on contemporary political issues that are all around us. And it's scary. It's scary to go into territory. In this Beit HaMidrash, our goal has always been to unite people and to bring them together. And it's very scary to tread into territory that could marginalize people, that can make people feel like, wow, if that's Judaism, I don't really want to have a part of it. And so the first rule of anything that has to do here, there is no politics. We don't speak politics. Whatever you believe, whatever you vote, whoever you're a part of, I'm not here to tell you what to do or how to do it. In fact, the common denominator of all the shiurim that are ever part of this Beit HaMidrash is that I don't really try to tell people what to do in general. And when it comes to Yichot Pesach, soon we're going to learn together all the laws of Pesach. At the end of the day, you're going to have to make your own decisions. How you observe Pesach, which halachot you follow, which you don't, which poskim you rule like, which you don't. My job is to bring you that information and to let you make a more educated decision, perhaps, than what was done before. But to tell you what to do, my favorite part of any experience that I have of learning Torah with my students around the world is when people argue with me. I know that guy is my student, she's been learning with me for 15 years, and they don't agree with me. They argue with me at the end of a shiur. They say, Rabbi, listen, we love you, but that's not how we feel. That is the greatest nachat moment that I could possibly have as a teacher, as a rabbi, as a human being, because I don't want you to think like me. I don't want you to come out a certain way at the end of this shiur. I just want us to be able to enjoy having a space where all of us who clearly have connected in some way to the Torah that we learn here at Shiviti should have a place to study together, and a place in which we feel that our opinions, even if they're different from each other, are always listened to, validated, and respected, even if we vehemently disagree with each other. And that goes for me, it goes for you, and it goes with everyone else here. So we're going to talk about political issues with as little focus on actual politics as humanly possible. And I'm asking you, please do me a favor. When it comes to asking questions, you can ask whatever you want, talk however you want. Make sure that when you speak, make sure, people ask pointed questions. They know, that president, this prime minister, that good for nothing. You don't have to give the commentary. You could just speak about things in a way that will never, chaz v'shalom, marginalize anybody else. In general, my opinion on American politics is very fanatic and not well respected or appreciated. My opinion is, at the end of the day, I belong to an autonomous Jewish nation. As such, whereas I'm grateful for the citizenship that I have in this country and I respect all of the laws and foundations of this country, I very much belong to a people of Israel that have not stopped governing themselves in the last 2,000 years. And if that doesn't sound like something you're familiar with, then, well, welcome to Mishpat Tzedek, because we'll show you that the Jewish nation is the longest ongoing national legal system that exists on the face of this earth. When our Chachamim were asked to choose between citizenship in their local countries or being second-class citizens and ruling over themselves, they always chose the second. We would much rather rule ourselves and be free to do so than to be free and equal to everyone else, but lose the right of maintaining our culture, our identity, and our national legal tradition. As such, I think it's really rude when people get involved in politics that don't belong to them, at least publicly. You may have seen my class on YouTube, The Elephant and the Donkey. I think that's what it's called. They tell a story about a guy who's invited to someone's house for Shabbat. He goes to Beit Knesset, he needs a place to eat lunch. He says, hey, anyone can host me for lunch? Sure, this couple is hosting lunch, why don't you go to their house? So he walks home with them for lunch, they get home, and as soon as they get inside of the house, the husband and wife start screaming at each other. He says, yeah, that's what you're going to do. So the husband takes the chair and he throws it out the window. The wife says, that's what you're going to do to my chairs? Watch this. And shakes all the plates and throws them out the window. And the guest says, yeah, okay. He takes the table and he throws it out the window. They look at him, what are you getting involved for? And he said, what do you mean? I thought we were eating lunch outside. Sometimes I feel like Jewish people in a country that we are part of, but we do not own. My opinion, Yonatan Halevi's opinion, you do not have to agree, is that as guests, it's not a good thing to get involved in the Shalom Bayit issues of the people that we are just graciously being hosted by. As such, you're allowed to vote as you want and do what you want, but in general, I refrain in any which way from sharing any opinions in public because at the end of the day, I don't want to be the rude guest. But let's be honest. Even if a Jewish person is actively involved in politics, whether it be in this country, it be in Israel, it be in wherever you are in the world, the one question I always have for Jewish people who are very vocal about their politics, and especially to the Jewish people who are very vocal about how religious they are, and that's why they're involved in politics. And they tell me, this political party is more in line with Torah than that one, or that president is more Torah observant than that one. And you're talking about two people that don't know anything about the Torah, two political parties, the Torah is not part of their platform. And ask them, on which grounds have you decided that Republicans or Democrats or Likudnikim or Labor, when do you decide who is more in line with Torah values? On which basis? You see, you present as I know Torah. And if I were to ask you about the laws of kashrut, you might be able to help me out a little bit. The laws of Shabbat, I'm sure that you know a little bit about the laws of Shabbat. But if I were to ask you about the Jewish laws of prison systems, how much do you know about that? The Jewish laws of homelessness, how about that? What about the Jewish laws of abortion? Not what you think you know, what halakha actually knows. What about issues of welfare, food stamps, in halakha? Have you studied those things? So when standing up in the world and saying Judaism proclaims A, B, C, X, Y, Z, I really ask, do you really know what you're talking about? Have you ever studied it? You're allowed to have any opinion you want. But when speaking in the name of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, or the Torah, or Am Yisrael, the question has to be, did we really ever study those things within the lens of the writings of our Chachamim and the Torah, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us on Mount Sinai? And I would probably assume the answer, at least so far in my life. Everybody says, well, where am I even supposed to look that up? Now that is a fantastic question. Where am I supposed to look up the laws of homelessness in halakha? That's a great question. Where do you even begin to look into welfare states and poverty in halakha? That's a great question. And before I answer that question, I have to go to the other side of the aisle. Na'ar hayiti, gam zakanti. I'm not so old, I'm also not so young. I've been around for a little bit. And in my life, soon as approaching Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, I hear over and over and over, especially from the religious Jewish camp, and I'm not talking about anything that's going on in Israel right now, but it could definitely have to do with it. People say, I want a more Jewish state of Israel. We'll celebrate Israeli Independence Day when it becomes a halachic country, a Torah country. You mentioned you've been to schools, you've been to yeshivot, you've heard this in synagogues before. Israel is not Jewish enough of a country. And then you turn to a person and you say, well, what does a Jewish Israel look like to you? What does this theocracy of Judaism look like if we're actually going to put it into action? If we're going to execute, I don't want to use the word execute actually, but you know what, it's a good word to use. What's going to happen if we take the laws of Shabbat, for example, and literally execute them? What is Tel Aviv going to look like on Sunday morning outside of the Bedin? How much blood is going to be in the streets of Israel when we stone to death every person who violated Shabbat? And violated Shabbat according to who? What happens if your rabbi says you can rip toilet paper, but her rabbi says she can't? You're going to stone her to death? When people say, I want a more Jewish state of Israel, in Israel there's a bumper sticker. It says, Medinat halakha, halakha ha-medina. If we'll have a state of halakha, we're going to lose the state of Israel altogether. And the truth is, the people who feel that way are not wrong. Because of the rabbis who are leading us today in kashrut, in gitin, in the few things they actually have jurisdiction over, are going to decide who's going to live and who's going to die, then I shudder to think about what's going to happen to a state of Israel that is going to adopt a very juvenile Torah. As you ask yourselves, well, let's say we want a more Jewish state of Israel. Where do we look for that? Where are those laws? Who wrote the books? I want to tell you, look around in the Jewish library, and I can identify a handful of Chachamim in the last 100 years who actually cared enough to provide a mature, sophisticated, complex, maybe not comprehensive, but an attempt to try to figure out how would we govern the state of Israel if we were given the opportunity to have a Jewish country? How would we deal with minorities in halakha? How would we deal with other religions and their religious sites in halakha? What about things that have changed in the world, like the equality of women, the status of non-Jews? Could a Jewish state of Israel have non-Jewish politicians? What about female government leaders? Not dayanim, not judges, but dayanim on a bedin. Has anything changed? The laws of witnesses, technology. Those are questions we have to answer if we wish to have a Jewish country that doesn't look like ISIS a couple of years ago. And the Chachamim who dealt with them are very few. If I may, I brought a small collection of books. There was a famous Chacham, Harav Ben Zion Meir Chai Uzian. But if you write in the chat box, I don't see what you say. So if you need to ask a question and you can't go forward without asking, please just unmute yourself and ask the question. This is a shiur, not a lecture. But if it's something that can wait till the end, I'm 3 hours behind you. So I have all night until my next class to answer any questions. So if you feel like it's something that can wait, let it wait also. There was a Chacham named Harav Ben Zion Meir Chai Uziel. He was the first Sephardic chief rabbi of the state of Israel. He was the colleague of Harav Kook, alav shalom. Harav Kook passed away before the founding of the state of Israel, and Harav Uziel continued for the first few years of the state of Israel until he passed away in 1953. He was the chief rabbi the first 5 years of the state of Israel. He wrote a book called HaShofet HaMishpat, the judge and the law. But this wasn't the only thing he did. Harav Uziel pushed for something very interesting. Harav Uziel asked that the Knesset of Israel in 1948, before passing any law, Israel doesn't really have a constitution. So Israel doesn't have what we have, which is, can we figure out if a law that the Congress or Senate are trying to pass is constitutional or not constitutional? Israel doesn't have a way to figure out if something is constitutional or not. But they do have an attorney general. They have they go, is this law democratic or not? And they receive an opinion, a review of that law, and the Knesset makes a decision based on that. Harav Uziel said it would be interesting if in a Jewish state of Israel, you also would get a Jewish opinion. Does the new law that the Knesset is about to pass, does it conform with Jewish law? Is it in the spirit of halakha? Does it contradict halakha? And Harav Uziel was present in the Knesset proceedings from 1948 to 1953, and whether or not the Knesset listened to him didn't matter. But every new law that was suggested, Harav Uziel wrote a chavad dat. He wrote a review of that law and shared his opinion as the chief rabbi of Israel, what he thinks, whether this law conforms, doesn't conform, what needs to be edited, what needs to be tweaked. What happened in 1953? In 1953, everything changed. The loss of a leader like Harav Uziel meant that we have chief rabbis that deal today with very important matters, like what is the blessing that we recite on bamba? Because bamba is a complicated question. Bamba is made out of corn. It also has peanut butter on it. And the question is, well, really, it's a puffed corn. So what blessing do you recite in a puffed corn? And the chief rabbis of Israel are really busy dealing with very important things. Or what's going to happen if chas v'shalom, a woman shows up at the kotel wearing a talit? So what should be national policy on a Jewish woman who came to pray at the kotel in provocative Jewish clothing? Those are very important things the chief rabbis of Israel are tasked with dealing with, and therefore they don't have time. I'm judging them favorably. They don't have time to deal with the issues that are actually facing the Jewish people in terms of how should we run a country and keep it Jewish and safe and sane at the same time. And I would argue that if you would go into any yeshiva, any rabbinical school, the amount of time that we spend studying the laws of kashrut and Shabbat and Pesach and Tefillin and mezuzot and tzitzit and who knows what else we study, that's the majority of what we study. How many of us study anything else that is actually relevant to the Jewish people outside of a religious context, in a civil context, in a social context? Things are changing. There are Batei Midrash today, ours, Baruch Hashem, starting today included, that have been taking the issues by the horns and trying to deal with it. But Harav Uziel wrote one book. Just after Harav Uziel, there was another Chacham who wrote a book. He wrote another famous set of books called the Tzitz Eliezer. Anyone know what his name was? Tzitz Eliezer?
Rabbi Eliezer Waldenburg.
Very good. Rabbi Eliezer Waldenburg. Rabbi Eliezer Waldenburg was a student of a number of Chachamim, but he spent very close time with Harav Uziel. In fact, When Rav Uziel founded the World Sephardic Yeshiva, to be the first yeshiva in the land of Israel that has a Sephardic philosophy and Sephardic teachings and a Sephardic mindset and Sephardic models of education, Rav Uziel chose Rabbi Eliezer Waldenburg to be the Rosh Yeshiva. And when you ask yourself, well, listen, it's the World Sephardic Yeshiva run by Rabbi Waldenburg. How Sephardic can Rabbi Waldenburg be? And Rav Uziel explained very carefully, and it's something you should know here at Shiviti. He said Sephardic is not about where we come from. This is despite Sepharad, and it's despite Ashkenaz that we came out Torah scholars. Sepharad is a mindset. It's a philosophy. It's an approach to Torah. And there is no one more fitting than Rav Waldenburg who encapsulates that Torah and can teach it to the next generation. Rav Waldenburg wrote a book, 3 volumes, called Hilchot Medina, The Laws of the State of Israel. And if his books in halakha were snatched off the streets by the Haredi community, the same thing happened to this book, but they were snatched off the streets by people who didn't want to see this book published. Because it made Rabbi Waldenburg into some kind of Tzioni, some kind of a Zionist. He somehow had some understanding of the state of Israel and wanted to cooperate. And that book is today, if not out of print, then you almost can't find it anywhere. And it's not a book that is studied at all. Even by his own descendants, that book was taken off the shelves. There is a conspiracy that states that his descendants wanted to print the book, but they were afraid of the backlash from the Orthodox community in Israel, so they pretended to be against the book while printing it at the same time. I don't buy into conspiracy theories. Suffice to say, I've met many descendants of great Torah scholars who simply live an opposite lifestyle from their grandparents. The second to last book is a 3-volume work written by Rabbi Yitzhak Isaac Halevi Herzog. You may have heard of him. He was an Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel. He wrote a book called Techuka L'Yisrael Al Pi HaTorah, civil law, or just law in general, for the Jewish people based on the Torah. Rav Herzog could not believe that in the state of Israel we would take British law into consideration, Turkish law into consideration, Ottoman rules into consideration, but we wouldn't take Jewish law into consideration. And he wrote a 3-volume work hoping that one day the lawmakers in Israel would look at the Torah and say, wow, there's something in the Torah that might be valuable for everybody. And that brings me to our final book where we're going to start today. And that is the book called Devar HaMishpat. The edition that I have is actually a discharge library edition that some library in Israel decided they don't need anymore. This book has been out of print since it was first printed many, many years ago. Actually, since it was second printed many years ago. And this book is written by Rabbi Haim David Halevy. Rabbi Haim David Halevy, you may have heard his name many times in our Beit Midrash. I'm not officially related to him. He was a Sephardic chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, Yafo, was a candidate to be Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel. I can't tell you about the politics that made sure he wouldn't be the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel. It was one of the more pleasant chachamim that we had in the last 100 years in the land of Israel, in the state of Israel. Rabbi Haim David Halevy wrote a 3-volume commentary on the Rambam Maimonides' laws of Sanhedrin. Because if we understand how Jewish government should work, we can then understand how the laws of Israel can be just and righteous while seemingly subscribing to laws that may seem outdated or irrelevant or maybe not fitting for the mode of government that we choose to live in today. This work, like I told you, is something that nobody has, nobody owns, nobody really learns. And the writings of Rabbi Haim David Halevy have actually come back in recent years. The religious Zionist community in Israel has embraced his halachic writings wholeheartedly, but have left behind anything to do with his stances on Israel or Judaism entirely because he doesn't conform to the party line. In another book that Rabbi Haim David Halevy wrote called Dat u'Medina, the state of Israel and the government of Israel, the religion and the state of Israel, Rabbi Haim David Halevy suggests that there always were 2 parallel governments running the Jewish people, something we'll talk about later. There was a religious court system and a civil court system. And not all laws in a religious country, a Jewish Torah observant country of Israel, follow Torah law. Some of them follow civil law. And that theory and his whole understanding, therefore, of Zionism afterwards means that though he studied by Harav Uziel and he studied by Harav Kook, his halachot were accepted, but nothing else was. And so, going forward, our main text that we'll be using, aside from the Rambam's laws of Sanhedrin, at least for the first part of this class, will be the commentary of Rabbi Haim David Halevy on those laws of Sanhedrin. And so, B'ezrat Hashem, before we go further at all, I want to share one last thing. Mori Harav Yaakov Peretz, you should live and be well. my rabbi and teacher, we were once talking about the Rambam. He said, Rabbi Yonatan, if you really want to know who the Rambam was, then what you need to study is not his Mishneh Torah, not his books of laws, not his Moreh Nevuchim, not his book of philosophy, or even a book of prophecy. The books you need to study are his letters. In the letters of the Rambam, you see the human being that he was. You can learn so much about a person by exploring their humanity. I hear people talk about Judaism, and where you can find Judaism, where you can discover Judaism. And I see that so many people look to teach Judaism through HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's give classes and endless seminars on God. Who is God? What is God? Where is God? Is there a God? What does he look like? All kinds of questions. Like, is God male or female? All kinds of fantastic questions. People like to talk about the supernatural, spirits, reincarnations. People like to give classes on the Mashiach, what's going to happen in the end of times and everything else. People love to talk about the spiritual side of Shabbat and all the mitzvot and the connection that happens to you and Hashem when you wear your tefillin. And they think that this language will share much with the world. But when I look at the Torah that says that the Jewish people are Am Chacham V'Navon Hagoy Hagadol Hazeh, this great nation. By the way, Goy is not a bad word. I don't know how that happened. We are the greatest Goy on earth. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ki am chacham v'navon hagoy hagadol hazeh. This nation, the nations of the world are going to look at us and say, what a brilliant and wise nation this nation is. And I think to myself sometimes, when we're sitting in the Beit Knesset and we say, there's an argument about tefillin between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Do the order of the tefillin go that way or that way? Well, you should wear 2 pairs of tefillin at the same time. And then what is going to happen? The Catholic priest across the street is going to say, unbelievable. Ki am chacham v'navon hagoy. Look at our brilliant people. They have tefillin that goes in 2 different directions. Must be such a wonderful people. Or you're sitting in the laws of basar b'chalav. What happens if a drop of milk falls on the outside of a pot? Now, is it where the liquid in the pot is, or is it above the liquid of the pot? Now, how much? Was it 1 out of 60? Was it a rabbinic prohibition, a biblical prohibition? The non-observant Jew out there is going to look at us and say, you know what? That makes me feel connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Unbelievable. Now I want to be Jewish. Yeah. I sometimes look at the Jewish people and I wonder, what is your end goal? Because if your end goal is to convince humanity that we are the craziest people on earth, you should keep doing Judaism exactly the way you've been doing it for the last 100 years. But if your goal is to actually influence the world and to be a light into the nations of what a world could look like if we adopted the Jewish values of Olam Chesed Yibaneh, a world is built through kindness. If we adopted values like Mishpat Tzedek, not just justice, but righteousness in justice. Not a legal system, but a system that truly wants V'asita hayashar v'hatov. You must do not just that which is right, because a lot of things that are right, but they're not good. You must do that which is right and that which is good. A conflict of right and good? What do you do when you're a judge and a police officer has just arrested a woman outside of Walmart who stole baby formula because she can't feed her kids? So do you arrest her and put her in prison and send her kids to foster care? Do you let her off the hook and say it's okay to steal? The job of a dayan, v'asita hayashar v'hatov, to know how to balance that which is correct, but also that which is righteous, that requires so much siyata d'shmaya, so much assistance from the creator of the universe. How do we deal with humanity in a way that is correct, that is upright, but that is also just and righteous? And the only place we can look at to find that, as Jewish people, is the Torah. And we have such a beautiful Torah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem. I gave you a beautiful teaching. Torati al ta'azovu, do not abandon my Torah. The problem is when the Jews abandon the Torah, then what happens to the nations of the world? What chance do they have to receive the beauty of our Torah if we've abandoned it already? And so I want perhaps to just ask one more question before we open up our PDF. The PDF is attached to the Zoom invitation. PDF is also in the WhatsApp classroom, I think. If not, it's for sure in the Google Classroom on the classwork section or at the bottom of the Zoom invitation. If I were to ask you, so what is the summary? If you were to say, what is halakha? What is the definition, the bottom line purpose of halakha? How would you summarize the word? Say, halakha, what is halakha? What is its purpose in the world? There's no wrong answer. You can share. That was a real question. There's a little button that says unmute. What?
Isn't it law?
Law. Okay, so law, the definition of halakha, law, yes. In Arabic, sharia. Yeah, that's...
It's the ruling of like our old-time generations.
Like the ruling of our old-time generations. Okay, what's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of halakha? What does it intend to bring?
It's practical, applicable. What to do with daily life?
So what to do with daily life? Okay, fine. What?
How God wants us to live.
How God wants us to live. So the word halakha means walking. Some say v'halachta bidrachav. We're commanded to walk in the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So halakha teaches us how to walk with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, I'll accept that.
How to be a good Jew.
How to be a good Jew. Okay, can I just push back on that because you're my sister-in-law?
Of course.
What about halakha that applies to non-Jews? So does that make them how to be good Jews?
Well, I mean, there are like the Shemis of B'nai Noah.
So those are also halachot. So what is the purpose of them? Because it's not to be good Jews.
It's not to be good Jews. Interesting. Okay. I don't know.
See, people think it's good to be related to me, but it means you're the only one I'm going to actually call out on something. Okay. Anyone else before I share an idea?
Hands raised.
I'm
wondering if it's about how to be in relationship with Hashem and with each other and with ourselves, like that full picture.
Okay, so relationship with Hashem and other people, that's good. But everything you said so far, including what Shira said, how to be a good Jew, because if you define what is a good Jew, then it will all tie in together. There was a famous physician. You may have heard of him before. His name was Harav Yitzhak Cardozo. Have you heard of him before? You ever heard the last name Cardozo before? He was also known as Fernando. That was his Spanish name. He was a Jewish physician. He was a philosopher. He was a writer. And he was born in the early 1600s and died in 1683. He has a beautiful book in Spanish that part of it has been translated to English. If you'd like it, you can send me an email, rabbi@shiviti.org. Maybe I'll post it to the classroom afterwards. It's in old Spanish, but someone translated a part of it into English, and I have it for free as a PDF, if you would like. This book is called the Excelencias. Las Excelencias de los Hebreos. I don't speak Spanish, so don't be upset at me for butchering the Spanish. And this book is a 10-part book. 10 parts of how the Jewish people are excellent, are distinguished from other nations, and 10 parts on how we're worse than other nations. It's a very interesting book in general. The Chachamim that came after him said incredible things about him. And when he had to summarize what is halakha, here is what he wrote. And I'm reading to you Chacham Fa'ur's English translation of that sentence. He wrote about what is a Jew, Shira, and then he wrote what is halakha. He writes, the Jews are pious with God, with their own, with the aliens. That doesn't mean UFO, outer space. That means with those who are different than them. With the pilgrims, with the enemies, with the animals, with the birds, with the trees. And in some, the entire law, Torah, halakha, the entire law is a compendium of kindness and a declaration of love. So if you want a Sephardic 1600s answer, what is halakha? In some, it's a compendium of kindness and a declaration of love. That should be your definition, going here on out. What is halakha?
You didn't just print it out, no?
And so, going forward, you have to keep asking yourself, is the halakha that we're studying right now in tune with its inner meaning of being a compendium of kindness and a declaration of love? Does this halakha bring piousness, piety, that's a word in English, right? Piety with God, with animals, with trees, with strangers, with aliens, with Jewish people? Or does it not? That should be your measuring stick. And with those words in mind, please, let's open up the PDF. And I told you I was going to tell you something from Moriya Rav Yaakov Peretz. He told me once that if you want to discover what is halakha, you should skip all the sections of Shulchan Aruch and read the last one. Choshen Mishpat. The law is about stealing and robbing and what happens if your cow hits that cow and what happens if people steal from each other and hurt each other and cheat each other. Because in seeing what the ideal human relationships are in the eyes of the Creator, you can learn so much about the Creator. And that's exactly what I hope to do here at Shiviti, New York. To learn about HaKadosh Baruch Hu together in a way that brings goodness to the world, brings goodness to us, and helps us understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the gift of His Torah. Now, for some of you, this may be the first time you're opening up a PDF that is full of Hebrew and has no English translations. So please, I'm asking you, don't click the end button right now. This is not the end of the world right now. I will translate every single word that we're going to read. If you don't know how to read Hebrew, that's wonderful. You don't need a PDF. You could just keep looking. My face is right here. You keep looking at the screen, and Baruch Hashem, all will be fine. You should ask people that started learning with me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that couldn't read a blessed word of Hebrew, and today are writing notes and punctuation and commas right on those papers. Print them out. Don't just leave them as a PDF on your iPad. Make sure you have them in front of you so you can write down words. Because trust me, you're going to want this. And if I may, the goal of learning together is so that we can have a group of people that are friends with, that we can connect to, that we can learn with, that we can know no matter where we are in the world, and especially if we're all the way out there in New York. There's a lot of Jews in New York, but not a lot of Jews that will let us think the way we think, that will let us talk the way we talk, that will let us share the way we share. So look around this room and see that you have each other. And B'ezrat Hashem, this is the beginning of something very beautiful. HaShofet VeHaMishpat. You open this book, it's called the book Devar HaMishpat. Devar HaMishpat means the matter of judgment. The matter of judgment. On the cover page, Birurim V'chikrei Halachot. These are analyses and research, I don't even have a word for you, Chikrei Halachot. Researched Halachot. Al Seder Hichot Sanhedrin LaRambam. Chevra, my English, based on the laws of Sanhedrin of the Rambam, essentially Rabbi Haim David Halevy is going to give us a running commentary on the laws of the Sanhedrin, Chelik Rishon, Volume 1. Met Haim David Halevy, from Rabbi Haim David Halevy. I posted his biography inside of our Google Classroom. Harav Rashi v'rosh avot batei adin leTel Aviv Yafo. This is the chief rabbi and the head of the Bedin of Tel Aviv Yafo. On the next page, you have the copyright information, and if this book was in print, I would ask you to buy it and not photocopy it, but I have no other choice but to share it with you this way. And then on page 3, he quotes the Torah. It's a radical place to start a Jewish book, to quote the Torah. So he's quoting from Devarim, chapter 17, and it says the following. If there is a matter of judgment that you don't know the answer to, Devar HaMishpat, ben dam ledam, ben din ledin, ben nega lenega. It doesn't matter which area of halakha it is in. Divrei rivot b'sharecha, and there's argument among your gates. What happened to the gates of a city? Why is there arguing between your gates? Who sits in the gates? The Shoftim, very good. The judges. Why do the judges sit in the gates?
To be available to the people.
Very good. So not like today. Today you want to talk to a rabbi, you have to talk to the secretary, to the gabbai, you have to swipe your credit card somewhere, you have to find hours, visiting times. The dayanim, their job is to be accessible to the people. B'sha'arecha, they're at the gates. So the judges, the dayanim of your city don't know what to do in a certain area of halakha. So what should you do? V'kamta, you should go up. V'alita al hamakom asher yivchar Adonai Elohecha bo. You should go to the place that Hashem has chosen. Where is that place that Hashem has chosen? Yerushalayim. Where in Yerushalayim? Now it's a bad word. Where? The Beit HaMikdash? Har HaBayit, on the Temple Mount. Who sits on the Temple Mount? The Sanhedrin. So the Supreme Court of the Jewish people sits there. When you have a halakha, you don't know the answer to, that's where you go. ובאת אל הכהנים הלוויים ולשופט אשר יהיה בימים ההם. You have to go to the Kohanim, the Leviim, the judges of those times. ודרשת, and you should ask them, והגידו לך דבר המשפט. And they will tell you what is the Devar HaMishpat. The pasuk continues, you should know, very famous pasuk. ועשית על פי הדבר אשר הגידו לך מן המקום ההוא. That you should do everything they tell you. The Torah goes to tell you, you should do what they tell you, right or left. There's a famous Rashi there. Rashi quotes the Talmud. Anyone remember what Rashi says there? Even if they tell you that
Left is right is left.
Even if they tell you that right is left and left is right, you just say, whatever they tell me, that's what I have to do. This teaching, by the way, has been perverted and manipulated ever since then to tell people that they should have blind obedience to rabbis. Whatever the rabbi tells you, doesn't matter. Right, left, right, it doesn't make sense. What you think doesn't matter. Just do what the rabbi tells you. And if you don't, but the truth is that this only exists in a specific context. Which context?
The context in which you are asking between two things that you're not sure what to do.
Okay, so very good. It's a matter of halakha that has no, it's called the din mufla. The Rambam talks about this in the introduction to Mishneh Torah. This is a law that has no logical way to determine right or wrong, correct or not correct. There's nothing else to do aside from ask the Sanhedrin. So you ask. So it's not about every halakha. You don't go to ask the rabbi every question. You're supposed to know the answers to your own questions. You only go for the things that have no answer. You need someone else, a body like the Sanhedrin. And what else? Who else does it apply to? Does it apply to any rabbi in the world? Does it apply to me? Does it apply to my friends? Does it apply to your rabbis? To my rabbis? Don't be scared. Chevra, don't be scared. I will not be offended if you don't consider me to be the head of the Sanhedrin and the Har HaBayit. I'm not afraid.
It applies to the Shoftim?
It applies only to the Sanhedrin. Only to the Sanhedrin. There is no other situation in which you go to a rabbi, you turn off your brain, you throw away the keys. That kind of Judaism that tells people, listen to the rabbis, whatever they tell you, don't ask questions, this is very dangerous. Not only is it dangerous, it goes against halakha. More than that, there is a Talmud Yerushalmi that counteracts the Babylonian Talmud, seemingly. And it says that it tells you right or left in order to tell you that if the Dayanim tell you that right is left or left is right, you're not allowed to listen to them. Meaning, the Sanhedrin only has authority when it makes sense. When it doesn't make sense, you're obligated to do something else. Now that's very complicated. I'm not jumping down that rabbit hole because clearly we have laws about a member of the Sanhedrin that disagrees with the Sanhedrin. So I'm not doing this right now. But you should know that if you want to read more about it, I'll post some articles in the Google Classroom for you to read into this deeper. But Rabbi Haim David Halevy says here, the second to last sentence at the bottom, on page 3 of your PDF. V'darshu rabotenu zichronam livracha b'sifrei. And our rabbis in the Sifrei interpreted this verse to say, they should tell you Devar HaMishpat, the words of judgment. V'darashta v'gidu lecha Devar HaMishpat, elu dikdukei mishpat. These are the details of our justice system. In these details, you are going to find incredibly wondrous things. If you do me a favor to turn to page 5, I want to take advantage of what time we have left to begin this introduction. Parashat Shoftim. HaShofet VaMishpat, the judge and the law. In parentheses, Divrei Peticha, words of introduction. Rabbi Haim David Halevy tells us the following. Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha b'chol sha'arecha. He's quoting the book of Devarim, which says, Parashat Shoftim, that you must appoint to the gates of your city judges and officers. Judges and officers. By the way, I'm going to give you a little teaser now for something that happens later in the book. We're going to have to work hard to get there. It's not going to happen right at the beginning. But in order to take away a person's freedoms, you have to be more than just a regular human being. Regular human beings can't take away another human being's freedom. Rabbi Haim David Halevy understands from this sentence that the job of a police officer is not a person with handcuffs who arrests somebody and brings them to the judge. Don't tell it to the judge. A police officer has no right to take away a freedom from a person unless they are qualified to be a judge themselves. There's a certain minimal, ethical, religious, educational qualification a person must have in order to take away even temporarily someone else's freedoms. And in an essay not so far away from here, Rabbi Haim David Halevy is going to complain about our modern police system. That the people that we recruit for our police work are sometimes the most ignorant brutes that we have around. Not always. They're very upright police officers. I'm not telling you not. But how many of us expect our police officers to be on the level of shoftim, of dayanim, of righteous people? No, they're just supposed to tie somebody up until they get to the judge. This pasuk tells you shoftim and shotrim are similar. In every place you must appoint judges and officers. Amar Rabbi Levi. Rabbi Levi says in the Midrash Rabbah, Lema hadavar domeh. What is this matter similar to? Lemelech, to a king, shehayu lo banim harbe, that he had many sons. Vaya ohev et hakatan yoter mikulam. But what can you do? He loved his youngest child more than all the rest of his children. Are you allowed to love your children more than one child more than your other children? So it's a good question. Can I really legislate that? Rather, what do we legislate? You're not allowed to show the love, right? Like Yaakov and Yosef. He showed his love to one child, and that got us all in trouble. So he had one son he loved the most. V'haya lo pardes echad. And he had one field, orchard. An orchard is where you have trees, beautiful trees. V'haya ahavo yoter mikol ma shehaya lo. In that particular orchard, he loved more than all of his other orchards. Amar HaMelech, so the king said, Noten ani את הפרדס שאני אוהבו יותר מכל שיש לי לבני הקטן שאני אוהבו מכל בניי. I will give this orchard that I love more than all my other orchards to my son that I love more than all my other sons. Meaning, I'll give the best thing I have to the best person that I have. Ken amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said the same thing. Mikol ha'omot shebarati eni ohev ela liYisrael. That I love the Jewish people more than all the nations of the world. And we can talk about what that means in a different shiur. I have some classes in my Kuzari class about that. Shene'emar, like it says in the book of Hosea, chapter 11, Ki na'ar Yisrael ve'ohavehu, va'ohavehu. That I, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, love the Jewish people from when they were a small child. Mikol ma shebarati eni ohev ela tadin. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, from all the things I created, the thing I love the most is the law. Din. The law. Shneimar keni Adonai ohev mishpat. Because I am Adonai who loves judgment, who loves the laws. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Noten ani ma she'ahavti. I will give that which I love, the law. La'am shani ohev. To the nation that I love, the Jewish people. Heve, that's what it means. Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha. Give judges and officers, meaning I will give the judgment that I love to the people that I love, Am Yisrael. And immediately Rabbi Haim David Halevy has a problem with this Midrash. And it's probably not the problem you have with this Midrash. So let's skip your problem and let's deal with Rabbi Haim David Halevy's problem. Here's his problem. V'divrehem tzarchim lechora bi'ur. There's a problem with this Midrash. I need some explanation here. Sheheyot v'chavivut Yisrael mitbatet b'netinat HaMishpat. Because we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows how much He loves the Jewish people by giving them that which He loves, which is the law. Imken, therefore, lama hiviu raya ledivrehem ma'pasuk shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha. If it's the law that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves, why is the proof text that our rabbis using about judges and lawmakers, and not about the judgment and the law itself? She'eno osek b'mishpat ela b'shofet. This pasuk about shoftim v'shotrim is about appointing judges, not about the righteousness of the law. And from that pasuk we learn that we have an obligation to appoint judges. Instead, our rabbis should have used a proof text, a verse that doesn't talk about the lawmaker, but a verse that talks about the law itself. If the gift is the law, then talk about the law. In the book of Shemot, he says chapter 28. In my Chumash, it's chapter 21. I don't know, it could just be a typo, but I am very careful not to cross things out of books. So I just wrote my book, it's chapter 21. Elchanan, are you in the class? Rabbanit, is Elchanan here? Elchanan, tell me, Parashat Mishpatim, tell me the pasuk. Ve'ele.
ואלה המשפטים אשר תשים לבניהם כי תקנה עבד עברי 6 שנים יעבוד ובשביעי תיתן לחופשי חינם אם בגבו יבוא בגבו יצא עם בעל אישה ויצא אישו עמו.
Very good, חזק וברוך. אלה המשפטים. Thank you, Elchanan. Thank you to Saba Shalom, who teaches Elchanan to read the Torah every week, the first psukim of the parasha, Tiskele Mitzvot, and to my mother who takes care of the rest of the family while that happens. Ve'ela Mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. Says Rabbi Haim David Halevy, you wanted to talk about the gift of the Torah? So talk about the Torah. Ve'ela HaMishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. These are the laws which you will place before them. שכל אותה פרשה עוסקת בתורת המשפט עצמו ולא בשופטים. We just read Mishpatim a few weeks ago. Parashat Shoftim talks about the lawmakers, the judges, but that's not what we're talking about here. It doesn't say HaKadosh Baruch Hu loved the Jewish people, so he gave them his favorite profession, which are judges. It doesn't say that. You know, they say, what is the oldest profession in the world? My father once told me the oldest profession in the world are lawyers. Why? It says in the beginning of the world, there was tohu vavohu, there was chaos on earth. Who else creates chaos in the world? I don't mean to offend any lawyers that are here. But this is meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't say he loved lawyers and that's why you should appoint for yourself judges. It doesn't say that. He said, I love the law, and therefore I gave it to the Jewish people, and that's what it means, shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha. It should say, I love the law, and I gave it to my people, and that's why it says, ve'ele hamishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. It's a good question, no? So listen to the answer of the question. Because the answer to the question is going to be the beginning of everything you and I are going to be talking about in the coming weeks. And that is that, well, let's read it together. אלא שכאן לימדונו רבותינו דבר גדול. In this Midrash, our rabbis taught us something incredible, something huge. שעיקר חשיבות המשפט, listen very carefully to what I'm reading right now. שעיקר חשיבות המשפט, because the importance, the main importance of the law, אינו בגוף המשפט עצמו, אלא בשופט. The law, the goodness of the law, the righteousness of the law, is not dependent on the law itself, the books of law, the canon of law, what it says in the book, אלא בשופט. It's dependent on the lawmaker themselves. שכן, one second, מחילה חבר'ה. My battery over here tells me something is not plugged in. 1 second. Forgive me. Of course, at this point, שעיקר חשיבות המשפט אינו בגוף המשפט עצמו אלא בשופט. So listen, שכן גם ספר חוקים הטוב ביותר. Because even the greatest book of laws, we're in a Jewish Beit HaMidrash now. Can I ask you, what is the greatest book of laws? Please don't tell me the Constitution. What is the greatest book of laws?
Shulchan Aruch.
Okay, that's the club. Let's do better than Shulchan Aruch.
The Torah.
The Torah, Baruch, thank you so much. The Torah, the greatest book of law. Lilianaz, you've been hanging around us too long. Shulchan Aruch came out first. Yeah. I'm glad my hardcore Maimonideans are not here. They would jump and say the Mishneh Torah. We all agree, the Torah.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I said the Mishneh Torah, but I was on mute. It's okay.
See, Hashem saved you from the embarrassment I just made Lilianaz endure. Yes? שכן גם ספר חוקים הטוב ביותר, because even the most amazing book of law, אינו יעיל להשגת מטרת המשפט במלואה, will never accomplish all that it needs to accomplish in the world, אלא אם כן מסורו בידי חבר שופטים נאמן, unless that book is entrusted to righteous, loyal, faithful lawmakers. Listen carefully, Rabbi Haim David Halevy just told you. The Torah doesn't matter. Those people that make clips about me, they're going to take this out. The Torah doesn't matter. The Torah doesn't matter unless the people who are executing the Torah are worthy of properly interpreting it and giving it to the people. We like to talk so much in Judaism, especially here in this Beit HaMidrash, about horizontal societies versus vertical societies, and I'm not taking away from that in any which way. Nobody's taking away from that. But that every kind of Torah in the world is very closely connected to who is the person teaching it. Who is the person who's bringing this Torah to the world? But this goes to say then that the other side could also be true. What happens if you have a really corrupt legal code, but very righteous lawmakers? What if you have a judge in some backwater country with laws that are oppressive to everything on earth? But you have a really righteous judge. Is it possible that that judge could actually accomplish more than a very, very, very corrupt Dayan with the most beautiful book of Torah, as understood in the Mishneh Torah and Shulchan Aruch? I'll give it to you too. Could it be? Don't be scared to say yes to that. That's the truth. It's something that I know all of you have felt in your heart forever. Just because the Torah is good, doesn't mean the Torah as it is being presented to the world today is good. Just because the Torah is righteous and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is righteous, El emunah ve'en aved tzadik v'yasharu, just because Hashem is a God of righteousness, doesn't mean that evil, corrupt people can pass off righteousness in a righteous way. V'lachen, and therefore, ba mitzvat Torah. That's exactly why there's a mitzvah in the Torah which says, Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha. You must appoint judges and officers. V'shaftu et ha'am Mishpat Tzedek, and they will judge the people a righteous judgment. V'darshu rabotenu zichronam levacha b'sifrei, and our rabbis taught us in the Midrash and the Sifrei. Maneh shoftim tzadikim. Which kind of judges should you appoint? Tzadikim, righteous ones. Umumchim, and experts. There could be good people that don't know anything. A good person who doesn't know anything can't help me much when it comes to a legal issue. A person who knows a lot but is a miserable person can't help me either accomplish goodness and judgment. I need both. I need a tzaddik and I need a mumche. I need righteousness with competence in the law. Lishpot tzedek, because that's the only way we'll be able to rule righteously. V'lachen, and therefore, chavivut Yisrael lifnei Adonai, the preciousness, the love of the Jewish people in front of the Creator, mitbatet be'otam mitzvah lemanot shoftim tzadikim u'mumchim lishpot tzedek, v'hi ikar HaMishpat. Where do you find the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's not in the Torah. Because what is the Torah going to help me if I have rabbis that don't care enough about goodness and justice to teach the Torah in a good and just way? Rather, where do I find the gift of the Torah? When we appoint for ourselves shoftim v'shotrim, v'shaftu, and they judged us with Mishpat Tzedek, with a righteous judgment. That is the gift of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the Jewish people. I don't know if you fell out of your chairs or not, but this is a very unusual thing for a chacham to write at the beginning of a book of divine laws, telling you that the divine law is not as important as the human being who's teaching it. But this is not something that Rabbi Haim David Halevy made up. This is an explicit halakha this way. If I may, I'm going to digress. I wanted to finish one more paragraph with you, but I'm not sure that I will. I want to read to you, if it's okay with you. Halakha. The Rambam and the laws of learning Torah. Torah learning. Chapter 4. In the first halakha, the Rambam says, V'chen harav, if there is a rabbi, she'eno holech b'derech tova, who does not walk in a good way, in a good path, af al pi shechacham gadol hu, even if he's a great chacham, v'chol ha'am tzarichin lo, and everybody in the Jewish people needs them. What do you mean everyone needs them? They are experts in areas of halakha that nobody else can. They need them. It's crucial. It's indispensable. En mitlamdim mimenu. It's forbidden to learn Torah from them. Ad shiachazor lemutav, until he returns back to the right way. Shneimar, like the prophet Malachi said. This is all based on a verse in Malachi, interpreted by our rabbis in Masechet Chagigah, who said, Ki siftei kohen yishmeru dat. The lips of the kohen will keep wisdom. V'torah yivakshu mipihu ki malach Adonai tzevaotu, and they will ask Torah from his mouth because he's an angel of Hashem. Amru chachamim, our rabbis tell us on Masechet Chagigah, im domeh harav lemalach Adonai tzevaot. If the teacher is like an angel of Hashem, Torah yivakshu mipihu, ask Torah from his mouth. Im lav, but if not, al yivakshu Torah mipihu. Don't bother learning from him. Don't bother learning. Why? Understand now why. What's the answer? Because the Torah that you learn from that teacher, even if I'm just reading to you what it says in the book, what kind of Torah are you getting? It's a Torah that has passed through a filter that is now bringing you something that is not pure, that is not righteous, that is not clean, that is not good. By the way, the question there in the Talmud was famously on which rabbi?
Acher.
Yeah, so remember there was a famous Chacham, Rabbi Elisha bar Avuya. He has some kind of spiritual experience, enters the Pardes. I'm not giving a class now on Kabbalah. He enters the Pardes and he comes back not observing the Torah anymore. He would ride with his student. Rabbi Meir would be walking with him on Shabbat. Acher would be riding on a horse. And Acher, they called him Acher. Rabbi Elisha bar Avuya lost his name. He became the other one. He would say, Rabbi Meir, you can't cross his line. Jews cannot cross his line on Shabbat. And then he would ride off on Shabbat past that line. So why did Rabbi Meir learn Torah from him? The question is on Rabbi Meir, not on us. I mean, Rabbi Meir is the exception, not the rule. You cannot learn Torah from everyone. Because even though the Torah is just what the book says, but it's not just what the book says. How many times have you heard people in the name of Torah say the most ludicrous things? The most evil things. The most vile things. The things that literally desecrate HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name in the world. But I'm reading it from a book. Of course you're reading it from a book. Of course it's a book. It's not what it means. It's not what it's supposed to mean. It doesn't fit in the context of Ki lekach tov natati lechem torati al ta'azovu. It doesn't fit in the context of Etz chaim hi lamachazikim ba. It's a tree of life for all who cling to it. V'tomcheha meushar. And all who support it are happy. I messed up. Deracheha dachei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom. Her ways are pleasant. And all her pathways are peaceful. It doesn't fit that kind of Torah. That's the context of the Torah. Your reading of the Torah doesn't fit. Rabbi Haim David Halevy is telling us something very important. Before we study Jewish national law, before you get to the code of law itself, you'll never know about the law until you understand who does HaKadosh Baruch Hu entrust the law to. The people who are entrusted with our halakha, they show us what HaKadosh Baruch Hu intends the law to become. I'm going to give you some homework. I don't want today's class to go too far over time. Can you let me finish the paragraph, or are you all dying to go to sleep? Is it okay if I finish the paragraph? Yeah? Beseder. Let me do this together. I don't want to leave you hanging. Let's look at the next paragraph. And therefore, Ne'emar b'shoftim. It says, Ne'emar b'minui shoftim. It says in the laws of appointing judges. In Shmot. V'ata an yu techezeh mikol ha'am anshei chayil. You must take from all the people men of valor, chayil, yirei Elohim, God-fearing, anshe emet, truthful people, sonei vatza, those who hate money. V'katav HaRambam, and the Rambam writes, let's read you the Rambam inside. The Rambam says in the Laws of Sanhedrin, chapter 2, the following. In Halakha Zayin, Law 7, the Rambam says, Bedin shel shlosha, the Bedin of 3. And here's my homework for you. If you can please read the first halakha in the second chapter of the Laws of Sanhedrin. You can find it in English on Sefaria, you can find it in English on Chabad.org, also has a Mishneh Torah in English. Look for Rambam, Mishneh Torah, Laws of Sanhedrin, chapter 2, read the first section there. What you need to know to be a member of the Sanhedrin. Yeah, all kinds of incredible things. We're not there yet. Now, the Sanhedrin is the Supreme Court in Jerusalem. But what about the regular court in my neighborhood? That's called a Bedin Shel Shlosha, a Bedin of 3 rabbis. And now if you read after the ... here in your book. Every time you appoint a judge to the Bedin, there has to be these 7 qualities. Ve'eluhim, and these are them. Chokhmah. Chokhmah is wisdom. Vira, fear of Hashem. Ve'anava, and humility. V'sinat mamon, and the hatred of money. They once asked a famous Hasidic Rebbe, the Kotzker Rebbe. They said, Rebbe, how are we going to find rabbis who hate money? All the rabbis we know love money. He said, don't worry, for the right price you can find a rabbi who hates money. Sinat mamon, someone who hates money, it's a sinah. V'avat ha'emet, someone who loves the truth. So just as much as they hate money, they love the truth. V'ahavat ha'biriyot lahem, they must love human beings. I once sat with the rabbi at a table, my wife and I, and he said, I hate my job. So why do you hate your job? I hate people. I said, okay, listen. Nobody forced you. Like, don't put a gun to your head and said, be a rabbi. Yeah? If you hate people, just advice, maybe you shouldn't be in the service industry. You know, like maybe you shouldn't be in the kind of place where you need to like people. But then I realized there's a whole world of rabbis who hate people, and just some people, I guess, they like being hated. So they sign up for that type of Judaism in which I, my whole life, live a hated existence. Uva'aleh Shem Tov. And don't get Hasidic on me. This is not the Baal Shem Tov. Yeah, this is not the, Baalei Shem Tov means people with a good name, a good reputation. They're nice people, but you start to ask about them and you hear all kinds of shady things about them. And then you wonder, I don't know, maybe that's not the person I should put in a bedin. These 7 qualities. And continuing in your text, the Rambam says all of these things are explicitly mentioned in the Torah. It says, Anashim chachamim unvonim, that you need chachamim unvonim. Can I ask you the difference between a chacham and a navon? Any Hebrew speakers here? No. Anyone remember Rashi? Chacham and navon? Rashi is a chacham.
I have a thought.
Yeah?
But I don't know the Rashi. But I was just thinking of the words. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
A chacham knows the law. He knows the books. Or in a navon, understands how to apply it in this situation.
Very good. I never embarrass him in public, so I have to do it now. That way I have what to ask forgiveness for by Yom Kippurim. If you ever have been part of the Shiviti forum, the Pesach forum, and you've ever had questions answered, 1,000 questions, that's the famous Rav Yitzhak Shem Tov. That's him. He's the real one. That's the real deal. Over there in New York, Baruch Hashem. Rav Yitzhak, you know Rashi. That's what Rashi says. He says the following. Chacham is one who knows what the book says. Yes? A navon it's not just like application. It's being able to extend the law to all kinds of new places that... There are very people who are very literal. They read something, that's all it means, they don't know what to do with it. So what you're saying is correct. The navon is the one who knows what to do with what it actually says inside of the book. Not all chachamim are navonim. I once had a professor. This professor, they say he was an expert in mathematics. Bli ayin hara, the guy didn't know how to teach. He didn't know how to explain anything. Anytime you ask a question, it's like, listen, he may be an incredible mathematician, but he couldn't teach for the life of him. So why is he a teacher? Yeah, part of being a lawmaker is not just knowing the law. You can leave those people in academia. But you need people who know how to do something with the law. It's not enough you know Shulchan Aruch. Good for you. Do you know what to do with Shulchan Aruch? Are you able to? So that's what a navon is. Chachamim unvonim. Harei balei chokhma amu. Viduim l'shivtechem. They have to be known to your tribes. Elu she'ruach habiriyot nochahem mehen. What does it mean they're known to your tribes? The people like them. You cannot appoint leaders on the people that they don't like. There's a halacha, the Kohen, who comes to bless the community. What's the blessing of the Kohen? He says a blessing. What's the ending of the blessing? No, that's the actual blessing. The blessing he says before the blessing. Yeah? Levarech et amo Yisrael ba'ah was commanded to bless the Jewish people with love. With love. Now what if the Kohen hates everybody in the synagogue? So then the job of the community is to say, listen, Kohen, it's really nice that you're fighting with that guy or that lady, but you can't bless the community today. You don't have to be a Kohen, but you are a Kohen and you want to bless the community. It has to be done ba'ahava, with love. You don't love them, so just step outside during Birkat Kohanim. It's not worth it for you to bless people with love that you hate. I was in a community recently, the Chazan hated the people in the community. It was unbelievable. Not only does he have his back turned to them, it doesn't even look at them, doesn't announce page numbers, doesn't care about them. The job of the Chazan, Shaliach Tzibur, you're a representative of the people. If you hate the people, so what are you doing up there? Nobody forced you, but now you're there. You're the chief rabbi, but you hate all the people. You hate half the country. Listen, nobody made you be the chief rabbi. You can just be a nobody rabbi like me. Yeah? But you chose to be the chief rabbi. As the chief rabbi, you have to be the chief rabbi of everybody. That's literally the definition of chief rabbi, no? You can't decide to only be a partial rabbi if you don't care. You have to choose everybody. That's a choice. We need people that people love them. They like them. What makes judges loved by the people? There should be people with a good eye. You know what a good eye is? So there's a simple meaning of, yes, they see things positively, okay? But there's actually a definition, a legal definition of this. The Rambam mentions it in his commentary in the Mishnah and Pirkei Avot. Ayin Tova, do you remember who said this? We're learning this now in my kollel. Who said this? Miri Yochanan ben Zakkai has students, and he's listing all of the qualities a person should have. One of those is Ayin Tova. What is Ayin Tova? A person who is happy with what they have. A content person. You know the people that are not happy people? They're not content. They usually try to project their misery on everybody else in the world. Their day is bad, so your day has to be bad also. They're suffering in life, you need to suffer in life. I once had a guy come here, and it's my Beit Knesset. He converted to Judaism. And he went through there's like different levels of Giyur, right? There's put you through first level of hell, second level of hell, 7 levels of hell. There's a few different levels of Gehenom that people go to become Jewish. Why they do it, I don't know. But this is this. In our Beit Adin, we have a rule. We don't want anyone to go through hell. We want people to enjoy the process of learning and growing and being part of a community. So it happened to be that somebody was in my Giyur program and they were loving to be Jewish. You can imagine such a crazy thing. They were really enjoying being part of the community and they had not yet converted to Judaism. And this person who had converted to Judaism but went through all the 7 levels of hell came and started screaming at me in front of everybody. You're making it too easy. People gotta suffer. I suffered, so you gotta suffer too. So whoa, the people get bullied and then they bully other people because if I got bullied, you need to get bullied too. I said, why would you want people to go through what you went through? Like we're finally fixing the system. We're finally doing something different and not breaking it. But sometimes when people are broken, then they don't know how to do things properly. And therefore here, you have to have a person who is content. Because if not, then nobody's going to like them. They have to have nefesh shefala, a humble spirit. Nefesh shefala, the Rambam in Pirkei Avot, he says also it's a person who doesn't need much. They're not very connected to material things. They don't run after things. V'chevratan tova. Their company is very pleasant. You ever sat with a person before and you couldn't wait till the meeting was over? You ever been on a date like that? Like someone set you up and it's not a blind date, it's the shadchan was blind. How did they think that I should sit with this person? I'm sure you've had it happen to you once in your life. Have you ever met somebody and you feel like I've known this person for 100 years and I just don't want them to go? Chevratan tova. One of the qualifications of being in a bedin is to be the kind of person that when you sit around, everybody wants to sit there with you. You have to be a sociable person. Umasaan v'diburan benachat im haberiot. The way that they speak to people is very kind and very happy and very calmly, even when they're arguing about things. Sometimes I hear people, the hallmark of an unlettered chacham is someone who screams. They scream all the time. I remember when I was in yeshiva, there was a certain rabbi, every time the guy got up to speak, he turned red in his face. It was like somebody was you should call 911 to help him out. It was a very painful thing to watch, but he was screaming at people. I once had a rabbi wag his fingers at everyone, what's wrong with you? You're teaching Torah to people. Relax a little, be nice. They came to listen to you. What do you need to scream at them for? Why the people that came to your shiur, now you told them they're all going to hell? Why? These people actually came to learn Torah. They came to learn with you. They came to now you need to scream at them too? Has to be a person who speaks kindly to other people. Ulahalan hu omer, the Rambam continues. Anshe chayil, they have to be valiant people. But what does it mean, hu omer? This is what Yitro tells Moshe. You remember in the Torah, Yitro tells Moshe qualities that you need to find inside of judges. We just read this in Parashat Yitro. Elu shehem giborin b'mitzvot. People who are valiant in their mitzvot. Umedakdekin al atzman. They're very particular about their mitzvot, not just what kind of tefillin they wear. They're very particular that they shouldn't have a negative reputation. They're good people. How can you judge somebody if they can judge you back? What does it say? Al ti'eh dan yichidi, ki en dan yichidi ela echad. You cannot judge a person on your own because only Hashem can judge people on their own. But in the context of a bedin, we do judge people. People come for judgment. That's what judges do. Now, You remember, we're going to read soon, Megillat Ruth. Comes time for Shavuot. How does Megillat Ruth start? Anyone know the first pasuk of Megillat Ruth? I know some of you don't Tanakh well. Pam, where are you? Very good. There's a time where the judges were judging. It said, there was a hunger in the land, a famine in the land. Whenever the Torah says, it was in the days of, you know always that something negative is about to happen. Like something we're about to read next week. How does Megillat Esther start? Very good. Those are code words. You hear Vayhi bimeh, that means something bad is about to happen. What was bad? There was famine in the land. Our rabbis ask, what does it mean it was in the day when the judges judged? What else do judges do? That's their job. It was in the day when the cooks cooked. It was on the day when the waiters waited. It was on the day when the pilot flew a plane. Of course, that's what he does. What do you mean it was the day when the judges judged? Say, Chachamim, Oy lador sheshafat et shoftav. Woe to the generation who was able to judge its judges. You would go to the Bedin, and the Dayan would say, hey, you have to return the money that you stole. Chachamim say, the judge would say, take a toothpick out between your eyes. He would say, take out the pole between your eyes. Meaning, Rabbi, if I'm stealing $100, you're stealing $1 million. The FBI is investigating you. So what are you telling me not to steal? You ever heard of rabbis investigated by the FBI? You ever heard of rabbis that went to prison, came out, and now they became Gedol Ador? They kiss their hand, they build Batei Midrash. I know you would never believe such things could happen, but sometimes in some very crazy places they happen. Here, woe to the generation that could judge its judges. It has to be somebody that you can't look at them and say, how could you judge me? V'kovshim et yitram, people that are able to control themselves. There's a teaching of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev. You don't hear me quote Breslev Chassidut often. Rabbi Nachman of Breslev said, how can those people be leaders if they can't even lead themselves? Meaning, the basic qualification in leadership is that you should at least be able to prove the product works on you. If it doesn't work on you, then what is it? So, ad shelo yeh lehem shum gnai velo shem ra. There should be nothing bad about them, no bad reputation about them. V'yeh pirkan na'eh. Even their childhood should be good. Now, this is it's a hard qualification, because all of us did things when we were in high school, we were in elementary, or college. We don't want everyone to remember them for us because we grew up since then. But the ideal, these are all ideal levels. Harav Kapach writes in his notes in the Rambam that if one of these things are lacking, then maybe it's okay, but ideally, this is what you're looking for. Ideally, a person who has nothing in their past that you could pull out of the closet. You see this all the time in politics. As soon as a politician announces their candidacy, all of it, they start pulling things out from the woodwork, like things that you never knew about the person, and then not about people who make things up, but the people who, mamash, the real things, they pull out of everywhere. That could ruin any type of legal system. Because now the person who's intending to judge, their reputation is taken away from them. One of the main qualifications of the Dayan is to be brave. To not be afraid to stand up to the oppressor and to stand behind the oppressed. Who do we learn this from? Who's the first leader that made his career by saving the oppressed from the hands of their oppressor? Moshe Rabbeinu. Very good. Shini Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? What is it? When Moshe becomes a person, when? Yeah, he's in the river. Yes, they take him to the palace. What's the first day out of his palace? What does he do?
The Egyptian.
Right? He sees an Egyptian man hitting a Jewish man, and he stands up for him. But you have to understand, at this point in Moshe Rabbeinu's life, is he Jewish or he's Egyptian? That was the question.
He's still operating as a slave.
Yeah, he was raised an Egyptian. He's the royal family. Why should he stand up for some Jewish slave? Don't get stuck here. It's not because the person was Jewish alone. Moshe Rabbeinu stood up for somebody who he saw was being oppressed. You see it the next day when two Jews are fighting with each other. Moshe Rabbeinu gets involved also, right? He says, Rasha, why are you hitting your friend? Meaning Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who's always standing up for the downtrodden. This is the hallmark of a Jewish leader. Not to stand with the oppressor, because it's popular to stand with those who oppress other people. It's to be unpopular. Avraham Avinu is called Avraham ha-Ivri. Avraham the Hebrew. What does it mean, a Hebrew? What is an Ivri?
A contrarian.
Very good. That Avraham the contrarian. Avraham was not afraid to stand up against the whole world when he knew that something was wrong. That's the hallmark of a Jewish leader. Kinyan Shneimar, like it says, Vayakom Moshe v'Yoshian, Moshe rose up and saved them. Uma Moshe Rabbeinu anav, af kol dayan tzarich lot anav. And just like Moshe Rabbeinu is humble, so too every dayan has to be humble. Part of humility, don't introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Dayan so-and-so. Relax. Your name is Yonatan. Your name is Shmuel. Your name is David. You have to introduce. A person should be humble. And in the final section, Yirei Elohim, God-fearing, kemashmo. It literally means that. Sonei vatza, hates money. What does it mean, hates money? Afilu mamon shelahen enan nivhalin alav. They don't even go crazy after their own money. People that money really doesn't matter to them. You know, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato, he was accused of all kinds of terrible things in his lifetime. In front of the Bedin, they summoned his Rabbi Yehoshua Basan, to stand up for him. And they claimed he was corrupt, he was taking money, Rabbi Yehoshua Basan gave a beautiful testimony about his student. And it was really complicated for him to stand up for his student, because the student was doing some things that were getting him in trouble. And Rabbi Yehoshua Basan said, Afilu tzurat matbea eno makir. He doesn't even know how to count money. The coins he doesn't even know. Nobody's saying here, Mamash, was an idiot, couldn't count coins. We're saying he's not a person who ran after money. There's some people, everything they do for money. What happens to a person who does things for money? You can never trust them. One of the things that disqualifies a person from being a witness is if they're a gambler. Why if they're a gambler? Unfortunately, a person who becomes a gambler will do a lot of things for money that don't always match to the level of righteousness you would expect. You need a person with integrity. Integrity means they cannot be bought with money. They don't run after money to gather it. It says in Mishlei that anybody who runs after money ultimately will suffer from that. Anshe emet, people of truth, they should be people who pursue truth because of themselves. Not for ulterior motives, not because it's cool, not because it's what other people are doing, because they are genuine truth seekers. They look for the truth, that's a qualification. They love the truth. They hate evil. And they stay away from any type of corruption or perversion. Says Rabbi Haim David Halevy, this is the personality of the lawmaker that must sit on the throne of justice. It has to be a lofty personality. Who has all of the qualities we just mentioned. Who is able to execute righteous judgment the way that the Torah actually wanted. And my friends, this is my last sentence that I'm reading to you today. I think that when we talk about Jewish national law, and this entire introduction that you and I are going to study together, before we can even talk about the law, before we can get stuck on the judgments and all of the books and how halakha works, you have to back up for a moment and look first at the lawmaker. Look first at the legal system. Look first there, and you will see what kind of chachamim we have, what kind of tzaddikim we have to have in order to have a country, to have a system that could bring about a Mishpat Tzedek, a righteous judgment. No, there was a story about Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu. I don't know why he came to mind, but he came to mind. Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu was once in a bedin, and a man came to complain about his wife. He would give gitin. He was a rabbi of a divorce court. And the Chacham Mordechai said, why do you want to divorce her? He said, she always comes home late at night. It must be there's another guy. She's cheating on me. All these accusations. Chacham Mordechai looks at the wife and says, what's going on? She says, me? The guy is unable to go to work. He stays at home the whole day. He waits for me to come home the whole day. I work 3 different jobs. I don't have a driver's license. I am an older lady. I have to walk between job to job. I take a bus between each job. Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu asked her, can you please give me your schedule, your bus route? I want to join you tomorrow. The next day, Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu, he doesn't get paid for that. He took a day off for the bedin. In the morning, he went on the bus that she went on when she went to work. The next stop, he waited outside 3 hours. The next stop. He came home to the man's house and he said, you chatzuf, you brazen person. You know how hard your wife works? You know how many hours she's standing and working and doing and cleaning and buses and riding? The fact that she even gets here and not 3 hours later is because she gets here because she wants to take care of you. She wants to make food for you. She wants to bathe you because you can't get out of your own chair. He said, what kind of evil person would ever drag a woman like that, an Eshet Chayil, to a Bedin? But who's going to say that in today's Bedin? Who's going to take a day off of work to go and say, wow, look at what righteousness this woman has? We don't create that anymore. And so if we have to identify, how do we bring about Mishpat Tzedek? Rabbi Haim David Halevy says one thing. Remember that even the greatest book of laws, when entrusted to the wrong people, is good for nothing. The greatest Torah in the world is good for nothing unless it is entrusted to righteous people who bring about righteousness into the world. B'ezrat Hashem, Hashem should bless us all, that when we continue learning together, we'll continue on the path of Tzedek. We should fulfill that which it says, Tzedek, Tzedek Tirdof. We should constantly pursue righteousness. Thank you so much for learning with me today. B'ezrat Hashem, I will see you next week, God willing. And for right now, I will stick around. If anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to unmute yourself. If you need to go, it's not offensive. Please feel free to go. I know what time it is, but I'm here to answer any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you again, maybe so much for learning with me. Toda Rabba.